back to Travis's Blu-ray shelf. I'm Travis, who, unlike James Bond, who everything he touches turns to excitement, everything I touch just turns to a lot of meh. And with me again, here with me again is my wife Cassie, as we continue going through the Bond film franchise. We've talked about Dr. No, we've talked about For Russia With Love. Today we're talking about the third James Bond movie starring Sean Connery, Goldfinger. For a lot of people, Goldfinger is, to them, the quintessential Bond movie. And it's not hard to understand why. This movie just has a lot of things going for it. Sean Connery is totally comfortable in his role as James Bond by this point. You can just see how he carries himself in the movie with total confidence. A really interesting villain that we're introduced to almost immediately, and some of the most iconic visuals in the history of the Bond film franchise. As a first-time Bond viewer, how do you feel coming to Goldfinger? Do you think the praise it gets is deserving, or?
For the most part, yeah. There were a few things that I necessarily didn't like. I mean, nothing specific. It just wasn't spectacular for me, but it was fairly good. I loved, one of the main things I loved, that was the opening. You know, that girl painted in gold, just flashing the different parts of the body while you're seeing the scenes in the movie. It kind of pulled you in and made you want to keep watching. Whereas the other movies didn't necessarily have those good openings. I hated Dr. No's opening. Who
didn't hate Dr. No's opening? But there was just so much going right for the movie. Like I said, from the very beginning, you know, you're introduced this villain that, you know, he's not the type of villain you would normally be used to. He doesn't pose a physical threat to Bond. You know, he looks to be an older gentleman, overweight. You know, you wouldn't think, okay, how is James Bond's going to dispatch this guy in a minute, and, you know, we'll be on to the real villain. But
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is, one of the things that I loved about Goldfinger was actually how he used James Bond's reputation against him. Like the scene where Felix and the other CIA agents come to the farm to, quote, rescue James because his little tracker has gone offline. He has Pussy Galore entertain James so that Felix and the other agents, all they see is James Bond womanizing as usual.
I agree. Goldfinger does a really good job of just being a very mental villain. You know, as I go on through Travis's Blu-ray show, you're going to learn that I love a good villain, and my favorite kind of villain is not the one that's the soldier villain, you know, that fights a good guy with his hands. You know, if you ever saw Unbreakable, you know where I'm going with that. But, you know, the arch nemesis type villain who really fights with his mind. And that's the thing about Goldfinger. He just has an incredible thought process. You know, he uses James Bond's reputation against him, as you said. You know, the crime he's planning to commit is just so ingenious. And actually, I kind of think, you know, as you said earlier when we were talking about doing this, how you can actually see it working today. Someone trying to pull this off.
Yeah, it was a very, you know, the whole time I thought, okay, he's going to shrink it down. He's going to melt it down. Basically he was going to steal it.
For those who don't know, and, you know, you can tell, you know, we've been using spoilers, but spoiler here. Goldfinger is, you know, you can tell by his name, he's obsessed by gold, and he wants to increase the value of his gold. So instead of, you know, just going out and stealing a bunch of gold, he instead plans to radiate the gold in Fort Knox, making the gold supply of the United States worthless, making gold more rare, and therefore what he holds be, you know, worth that much more. And, you know, I mean, you can continue. It's just, I want them to have an idea of what we're talking about.
Of course. But, you know, that idea of making it where, you know, and they tell you at the beginning of the movie, his gold is spread out into the different markets. It's in England, which has one rate. It's also in Japan, which has a higher rate. He has some in Egypt, which has an even higher rate. So once the United States' gold, which seems to be at that time a little lesser than everybody else's, it's going to be completely wiped out. And while it has the lesser value, that's still a great amount of gold that is going to be wiped out because it's Fort Knox. And then the way that they do it with the gas and the, you know, all that stuff is just...
We don't want to give you all the details because ultimately I can tell you now, we're going to tell you, watch this movie. If you watch no other Bond movie from the 60s, I would definitely say this is the one to watch. But more about the movie, one of the things I love is Honor Blackman as the Bond girl, Pussy Galore in this, is just, you know, we're the first two movies, all the two Bond girls were kind of like meek and couldn't, you know, really get in. You know, they were just kind of mousy and kind of submissive. You know, the typical 50s, 60s era woman kind of. Pussy Galore actually, you know, she felt like she was a match for Bond.
Right.
She really had a whole this level of confidence. She wasn't, you know, really intimidated or charmed by him. And she could take him, even possibly take him in a fight.
And not only that, she was greatly acted. I think she is actually so far one of my favorite acted parts in the series so far by this point.
You add in all the traditional factors of the Bond movies: Bernard Lee, Lois Maxwell, Backus, M, and Moneypenny respectively. Desmond Llewellyn makes his requisite appearance as Q. And that was another thing, you know, this is when we really start getting into the Bond gadgets. But even at this point, the Bond gadgets aren't very outlandish. I mean, the most extreme gadget he has is a radio transmitter, you know. So, you know, it's not too extreme. It's not one of these things like, oh, Batman's utility belt and I have something to get out of every situation. It's very much believable, and it's stuff that you would believe they had at the time.
He actually had to handwrite the note at that one point.
Exactly.
And had to fold it up around his tracker.
Really, I don't know there's a point to really talking about this movie that much, because nothing we could really say, I feel anyway, can do it justice. All the parts were acted well. There was no really weak point to it, other than the people that Goldfinger was involved in this operation with. They were a little over the top with the whole old school mobster type.
I didn't like that part at all.
But I feel like their acting was made up for the fact that Gert Fraba, who played Auric Goldfinger, you know, how animated he was describing this caper. It really made up for it. And it's just that talking about how all the peaks of human achievement have been reached in so many of these different fields except crime, you know.
Exactly.
Just how he delivered that line, just, ooh. And who can forget the image of the character Jill Masterson laying on Bond's bed, completely covered in gold paint. That's an iconic Bond moment. And the famous, do you expect me to top Goldfinger? No, I expect you to die line. Anytime you see a highlight of Bond film clips, that's going to be one of the first ones you see. Everyone remembers it. Everyone knows it. And the best thing about this movie is, like, while I enjoy Spectre, it takes a break from, you know, Spectre and Blofeld, and it gives you that, you know, this isn't the only thing going on in the world of espionage. You know, there are other plots, there are other crimes going on. So I feel comfortable in saying that I can't give this anything but a 5. I know there's a lot of people that'll go back and watch this in retrospect and say, oh, you're looking at this with nostalgia or rose-colored glasses. But it's hard to give it anything but. It's the pinnacle of what Sean Connery was as James Bond. It has a great villain. It has a tough, believable Bond girl. And I haven't even mentioned Oddjob, who is unquestionably one of the best henchmen ever in a Bond movie. I mean, a guy that can kill you with a steel-rimmed hat. That's just...
You know, one of my favorite characters was actually the golf caddy.
See, another scene that, you know, gets looked over. That's my score. I'm just going to stop talking. I'll let Cassie tell you what she thinks. For me, it's a 5. It's a must-watch. It's a must-own if you care anything about the Bond movies.
I actually toyed with this one. I thought about giving it a 5, but really, there were a few parts that didn't quite hold up. The Oddjob is actually one of them. The scene where James is attached to the bomb, and Oddjob throws the guy that has the handcuff key over the top and then just stands there and looks at Bond as Bond is like going to get the key. And then instead of throwing the hat, he runs down several cases of stairs. And there are a couple other times like the mob guys and stuff like that. So I actually gave it a 4.5 out of 5. Almost the 5, but there still are a few things that for me don't quite give
almost
it
a 4.75 out of 5.
Yeah.
But you agree with me that people need to see it.
Yes, it is one of the ones that if you don't watch any of the other Sean Connery Bonds, this one is one that you really need to watch. It really, in my opinion, this is one of Sean Connery's better Bond roles.
There you have it. I'm a 5, she's a 4.5. You know, it's a rave review. Go watch it if you've never watched it before. If you have watched it, go pop it into your Blu-ray DVD player, VHS, or the antiquated viewing devices I like to call it. You know, if you have it, watch it again. You know you love it. That closes the case on Goldfinger. Next time we're going to be pulling Thunderball off the shelf, the 4th Sean Connery Bond. In this we'll see the return of Spectre. And, you know, we kind of got a couple mixed opinions about it, but we'll get that into next time. Once again, like us on Facebook, like us on, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to this channel. All that should be in the stuff below. And until next time, if you think all these videos are a joke, I never joke about my work.